Hi everyone, this tutorial will be to show an alternative to do the retopology in Blender. Now it's possible to do a very good retopology on Marvelous Designer itself. Keep in mind that this solution is all available for Marvelous Designer and not for Cloud 3D. So, as you are probably aware, when we are working with Marvelous Designer or any simulation software, we are working with triangles, and the objectives for the retopology is to convert this high density geometry into a lower density geometry, and if it is possible, convert the triangles to quads. Also, keep in mind that we have a set of tutorials going through all the process to create a garment from the scratch on our YouTube channel. So let's continue. This is the very basic geometry that you will end up while you are simulating garments in Marvelous Designer. Now, if I hide the geometry, okay, something like this. We are already familiar with this window. This is the 2D pattern window. Here we can see the patterns. The way Marvelous Designer works is like you create vectors, and between those vectors you create a shape. Those shapes are converted to patterns, and those patterns are converted into geometry when you run the simulation. All of this is done by the program itself. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to create another step on this workflow, and this step will be the retopology. So how do we approach doing the retopology inside the program? This is how we do it. We need to change the mode from transform or from to edit pattern. We need to go to edit topology. Once we are on edit topology, this is the tool, we will be able to start creating the retopology from scratch. So how this is going to work? The program will take the base simulation geometry, and we will be building a new topology on top of that. This is how it works. Now, we have 3 different tools. I will be showing the function of each one. We are going to start with the patch topology. Right now we are going to say, for example, 5, and this patch topology allows us to create this kind of behavior. And it will automatically create a grid, and that grid will be converted later into geometry, into quads. For example, we can start something like this. Then if we hit create, it will create the new geometry. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if I go to the other side of the pattern, we will see those blue dots. Those blue dots means that between the dots there is an edge. So if I want to keep the same topology, I will need to do something like this. Then if I hit create again, I will end up with the same amount of polygons in the front and on the back side. So this will be the very basic. Now, how can I continue developing this idea? Now I'm going to change the tool. I'm going from patch to create, and I'm going to start working the topology, something like this. I'm just creating the topology. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm creating it one by one. Another thing to keep in mind is that since we are aiming to have a low poly mesh, we don't need to be 100% perfect. This difference between the pattern and the polygon is fine. What you don't want to do is something like this, because if I want to continue later in the process, I will be forced to create a triangle, and I don't need to do that. try to avoid triangles or need you have to make a triangle. But this is not the case because I can do something like this, for example. Then what I can do, for example, is I can continue building the geometry, something like this. Once again, just to refresh, what I'm doing is I'm on the create tool and I'm clicking. One click, 2 clicks, and it will automatically create the polygons. Now I have to be clever, or I have to think a bit how I'm going to approach the distribution of the polygons. For example, I might want to do something like this. For example, then I might want to do something like this. Then I might want to do something like this. Once again, I'm thinking in quads. I'm trying to avoid creating triangles if I don't have to. Then I will have something like this, something like this. Do I have to be 100% perfect? No, because I can edit this later. I will show you how in a second. Also keep in mind that since this pattern is symmetrical, what I'm doing in one side, it will be reflected on the other side. So let's say I have this topology. And go to edit topology tool, and I can start tweaking the topology as much as I want. So in this particular case, all the edges of the topology have 4. The only that have 5 sides is this one. This quad have, this vertex have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why this have 5? Because I'm using this point to change the direction of the flow. Okay, I have something like this. This is fine to work with. I can start tweaking a little bit if I want. It's all good. Now, I know that I have one here, 2, 3 edges, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges over here. So I need to keep the same proportion. If I have 3 here, I'm going to start with 3 on the back. And if I have 6 on the arm, half of the arm, I will have 6 half of the arm. So how do I keep developing this idea? The same way. For example, I'm going over here, and I know I will need 6 over here. So I will go to create, and I'm going to create 1, 6. Once again, do I need to be perfect? No, I don't, because I can always come back a little bit and tweak the geometry. What I'm trying to do, or what is my main goal when I'm moving the vertex, I'm trying to have the same density of polygons, the same amount of distribution on all the mesh. Now, I can continue developing the idea. I have 1 over here, for example. I know I have 3. Now, I'm using only the create tool. If I made a mistake, it doesn't matter. I can correct it later with the create tool. Okay, let's continue. If I start on a place I don't want and I want to turn back, I'm just pressing escape, and I cancel the tool. Perfect. My main goal here is to have the perfect topology, and then I can adjust the distribution. I don't need to do everything at the same time to be perfect from the get-go. It doesn't have to be that way. So, if you face this problem, it doesn't matter. You can always go to edit topology and start deleting the retopology. Then you create it once again. In this case, once again, I don't want to do something like this because I don't have to. I will do something like this. Is it perfect? It is not, but it doesn't matter. All you have to do is an approximation. Now, later I can start being gentle and tweaking a little bit the distribution of the polygons. Just a little bit. Okay. So that's something like this. So I don't have too much stretching on the polygons. Once again, you don't have to be 100% perfect. Okay, I have more or less something like this. How can I continue working on this piece? I know I have 5 sides here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 here, 6 here. Okay, now what I have to do is I will build the rest of the piece using the same approach. Okay, if I have to work over here, I know I have 6. Now I will respect the same idea. The thing is that maybe if I go 6 here and I do something like this, maybe it's alright on the horizontal side, but maybe it's a little bit too much on the vertical. So it might be worth doing it manually. So I'm going once again to the create topology, and I will do the same basic idea. I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to start creating the very basic layout. Okay, I have the very basic idea, then I'm starting to tweak the distribution a little bit. Okay, now I have to make a decision. Maybe I can do, let's say, 1 over here, 1 over here. I'm trying to solve a puzzle the best way possible. Okay, now that I have the main idea, what I can do is start thinking about the distribution. This will be more or less my plan of action. If the distribution is not perfect, it doesn't matter because you can always adjust it later on the process, as I'm doing right now. And if you have a little bit of stretching, it's also not a big deal. So, for example, something like this. Then I know I have 6 over here, I have 4 over here, and I have 6 over here. Now I will continue building that idea. I'm just feeling at this point the problem is mostly solved. So I'm just following my plan. This process usually goes faster once you get used to the workflow. Okay, I have the geometry, now I have the topology, and I'm just trying to have a somewhat decent flow. We can even, for example, add another vertical loop if we want to, but in this case I will leave it at 4. I have a bit of stretching, but it's alright. Okay, perfect, something like this. Now I have, since it's symmetrical, those patterns are linked. I have all the mesh with the retopology, but keep in mind that it is still not done, because if I go to the transform, I won't be able to see the new topology. I'm still on the old one. So to convert and to create the new topology, I need to do another step. Okay, but before that, if I go to the UV editor, I have something like this. In this case, it's working properly, but it can happen that I might have something like this. And to be able to create the texture to be visualized on or the avatars, you need to have a proper UV mapping. Not only texturing, but UV mapping. So what does it mean? It means that everything, all your garments, need to fit in the 1-to-1 UV space. 0 to 1, 0 to 1. You can use the green line and the red line as a guide. Now, what do I need to do if I have something like this? I need to fit everything inside. Something like this. Just be aware that sometimes it can be a little bit tricky, because if you have this zoom, you might think that this is 1-to-1, but it's not. Just use the red and the green line as your reference, so you can be sure all your geometry will end up with proper UV mapping. Okay, let's go back to the 2D pattern window. Okay, we have something like this. Now we go to the topology. I have my plan. This is my plan, my setup. Now I need to convert this geometry, this plan to geometry. How do I do this? It's very easy. I'm clicking outside. I'm doing right click, and I'm going to press remesh all duplicate. If I hit duplicate, the program automatically will create the remeshed topology. Now, if I go to mesh, you will be able to see that now I have two meshes. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing it so you can see what's going on. Now I have two meshes. I have the triangulated mesh with the simulated topology, and now I have the proper retopology mesh, this one. Now, if I select everything in this mesh and I go to File, Export, FBX or OBJ, it's the same. For example, in this case, I'm going to save it just to show you. Then if I go to it's a right thin, and then you can select the side and you can export, and you will be exporting also the retopology mesh to start working on Blender. Just as a last checkup, you can go once again to the UV editor and verify that everything is in the proper UV space. What is happening right here? In this case, the new topology generated is outside my one-to-one. So what I need to do is, once again, for example, I can do something like I can move, or I can put it on top, something like this. Keep in mind that the tools for making UV maps in Metaverse Designer are still very basic. Just this is the very basic setup to keep you working and to keep working towards the final product. So once again, I'm going to the 2D pattern window. I'm going to select everything with the new topology. Everything is made of quads. Now, let's say, for example, I want to export the OBJ. I can go OBJ select. Then I will be prompted with this window, and I am well thin. I want to make sure I have a UV coordinate. I can set up the scale, and then I can hit OK, and I will be exporting the retopology mesh for me to finalize the project. The next step will be on Blender to finalize the idea. What I did was I went to File, Import, OBJ or FBX, and I got this in Blender. The only thing that you need to keep in mind that if the mesh is going to be separated, what you can do is something like this. You can select everything. I'm on object mode. I'm going to change to edit mode. I'm going to press A to select everything. Then I'm going to press M, and I'm going to press merge by distance. Then I will merge some of the vertex, but some of the vertex won't be merged. So I need to try to find them and check them. This is how you do it. You select two vertex, 1, 2, and then you press M, and then you merge at center. Keep in mind that at some point it might look that they are merged, but they are not. So it's better just to be sure. And since we have a very organized topology, it won't take that longer. So I have this. I'm pressing G to move. Once I'm clicking, I'm pressing G to move, and then I'm merging. How I'm merging? Once again, I select one, I select the other, I press M, and I merge at center. I can also merge at last. I'm doing it with a shortcut. This is why it is a little bit faster. I select one, I select the other. I'm verifying because can you see it over here? It looks like it is the same, but they are separated. So once again, I press M, merge, merge. With practice, this process is faster. One, merge, merge. And since I made a plan before doing this, everything will match perfect one side to the other. This is why it's so important to be very organized when we are doing this type of retopology, this type of processes. As you can see, I'm always doing an extra verification to see that everything is working properly, because sometimes it can get tricky. Okay, so this is a very basic piece, but the same principle applies to all the garments. Just try to work from basic to complex. If you have a very complex piece, so just make the very basic plan and start building up from it. Something like this. Okay, this is merge, 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 merge. Okay, and then everything should be fine over here. And perfect, 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 perfect. Okay, now everything is one mesh, hopefully. If I go to the UV editor, you can see that we have a proper topology and proper UV maps. So this is ready to go to Substance Painter or to do any kind of texture work. This will be how you go from a simulation mesh to a highly optimized mesh to be used for the avatars in the metaverse. In this case, okay, I forgot this. Oh, okay, this one. So yeah, this is a very basic idea. Then you can start creating materials. For example, material 1. If you want to do the texture work inside Blender, for example, you can go to the shader editor. You can create an image over here. And since everything has UV maps, you can work with it without any issues. The only thing I want to change is I want to change the sharp. Okay, then we'll create a texture, a new texture, something like this. Then the only thing I need to do, I need to go to texture paint, and I can start doing any kind of texture work. And everything will be reflected on the proper UV map. So I will end up with a proper texture, a proper UV map, and a proper topology. This is ready to be used in the metaverse. Thank you very much for watching.